Where did it all go wrong? Just as I thought he was beginning to make a comeback in this championship, Charles Leclerc made the costliest error of this season, one that will most likely cost him his maiden world title. Now, I usually don't make such bold claims such as these in my videos. Knowing sports and Formula 1 in particular, it's never over until the fat lady sings. No matter how bad the circumstances get, as long as there's still a mathematical chance of success, there's reason to be hopeful. Leclerc and Ferrari can cling on to the fact that there's still 10 races to go, and they have one of the fastest cars on the grid. But having a fast car is never enough, particularly when you're going up against a team like Red Bull and a driver like Max Verstappen. What happened at the French Grand Prix will be remembered as arguably the biggest turning points come the end of the season. Leclerc secured pole on Saturday with the help of a tow from his teammate, Carlos Sainz. With Ferrari opting for a higher downforce setup in comparison to the lower downforce on the Red Bull, it made for a fascinating race dynamic. The Scuderia were quicker in the more technical sectors of 1 and 3, whereas the Bulls were faster in a straight line. As the race got underway, Leclerc managed to fend off the Flying Dutchman, with Hamilton jumping Perez for 3rd place. This was crucial for the battle between Verstappen and Leclerc, as Perez was no longer able to help his teammates through strategy. Track position proved to be extremely valuable, considering how difficult it was to overtake, even for the slippery RB18. Max was pressurizing Charles for the first 13 to 14 laps, before dropping off the pace and consequently coming into the pits. Now at this point, Ferrari were telling Charles to stay out, despite his tyres blistering. But I guess considering the hard tyres weren't as fast as they expected, they wanted to maximize the length of that stint as much as possible. However, just 1 lap after Verstappen pitted, Leclerc lost the car going through Debussy, and that was the end of his race. Now initially, there was talk about throttle blockage being the main reason for why he spun out, similar to the issue he was nursing in Austria. However, Charles himself admitted to it being driver error after the race. And anyway, when he said, "I can't go on throttle" over team radio, he was referring to being unable to reverse the car out of the barrier, rather than it being the cause of his accident. So what actually happened then? Because on the previous lap, he took pretty much the exact same line and went through the corner perfectly fine. Well, various elements could have come into play. Change of wind direction, tyres overheating, but ultimately, it was an error nonetheless. To his credit, Charles put his hands up and took ownership, but that was a massive blow to his hopes of a title comeback. I've seen a lot of people compare this moment to Sebastian Vettel's retirement in Germany 2018. Both drivers were leading the race, crashed out due to driver error, and their championship rivals going on to win. Both incidents also happened around mid-season, so I can understand the similarities. However, there are a number of differences. At that point in the 2018 campaign, Vettel was trying to extend on the 8-point lead he'd built up over the first 10 races, so he'd only end up 17 points down in the aftermath of that event. Meanwhile, Leclerc was pushing to close the gap between himself and Verstappen, but has now ended up 63 points astray. 63. And with just 10 races to go this year, I really don't see that being overcome. Similarly, after Germany 2018, there were also 10 races left of the season. And Ferrari still had a super competitive car. In fact, they had the fastest car up until Singapore, where some upgrades made failed to work as expected. They returned to form in Austin, but at that point, it was already too late. Lewis had already done the damage by securing 4 wins on the trot. In the same way, Verstappen is maximizing the number of points scored on the days where Leclerc has suffered bad luck or made a mistake. Another important factor to note is that 2018 was Vettel and Ferrari's second opportunity to overthrow Hamilton and Mercedes. After coming close the previous year, they lost it all in the span of just a few races. On the other hand, 2022 is the first time Leclerc has had a car capable of winning the title, so we can give him some leeway in that respect. These two seasons also share some other similarities, in that Ferrari have been absolutely horrific operationally. Bad pit stops, strategic blunders costing their drivers wins, just the usual things the F1 community has become too used to seeing. In Leclerc's case, it's been a lot worse, considering he lost a guaranteed win in Monaco and wasn't given the chance to fight for it in Silverstone. He also suffered retirements while leading in Spain and Azerbaijan, whereas Vettel didn't have any mechanically related DNFs at all in 2018. Instead, his championship fell apart due to both Ferrari being unable to keep up in the development race with Mercedes and the 4-time world champion making too many mistakes, especially towards the tail end of the season. In that case, Leclerc has been less error-prone this season compared to Vettel, this time 4 years ago. Considering we're just over halfway through the season, however, it's yet to be seen whether he and Ferrari can turn it around, or whether it'll be the same story after the summer break. Their development progress will also be very important, but at this point, they'll also need to rely on some bad luck for Red Bull, just like they were relying on bad luck for Mercedes. But that's never a good situation to be in, considering it's out of your control what happens to your rivals. But when it comes to my opinion on the parallels between Vettel in 2018 and Leclerc in 2022, I can see it from the perspective of Ferrari letting them down. However, we'll see if this is the last mistake Charles makes for the rest of the season. Now, Ted made an interesting comment when interviewing Christian Horner after the race, asking him whether he thinks Leclerc is too crash prone. And I think a number of F1 fans share those sentiments. Charles has traditionally been quite clumsy in the past. Whether it be a lapse in judgment or something else, it's hard to ignore the number of times he's fumbled the bag all by himself. In my opinion, I think this question is quite relative. When you compare the errors to, say, a Hamilton or a Verstappen, or even Alonso for that matter, of course it's going to look a lot worse. Those guys rarely ever drop the ball. But in comparison to pretty much any other driver, it doesn't seem as bad. For me, Leclerc is extremely talented, and I don't think anyone would disagree. He's arguably the fastest driver out there on pure pace. He can dominate Sundays a lot better than he was able to during his maiden season for Ferrari. He has been faultless 99% of the time. However, those moments where he makes even the tiniest of errors are always the most costly against the very best, and it's still an area of weakness. He said it himself, "I've been performing at a high level, but if I keep making mistakes, then I don't deserve to win the championship." At the end of the day, the best driver-team combination wins titles. Leclerc cannot do it without a strong Ferrari package underneath him, and Ferrari most definitely can't win without Leclerc. In fact, on a side note, what they did with Sainz's strategy in France was genuinely mind-boggling. First of all, Carlos's engineer told him they had a 5-second stop-and-go penalty, only for the Spaniard to correct him and say it was merely a 5-second penalty. As if the drivers aren't occupied enough, they also have to update their own team about the status of their race. Then, they were telling Sainz to box literally as he was overtaking Perez. And as if it couldn't get any worse from there, they threw away what could have been a comfortable podium finish by pitting him with 10 laps to go. Now, Carlos obviously defended his team and said it was the right call. But, come on bruh. Who do you think is going to believe that? At that moment in time, the tyres were still holding up well, and most likely could have been squeezed to the end of the race. With Checo and Russell battling as well, Sainz would have pulled to the 5 seconds needed to secure the podium too. But I don't know man, I've just come to expect stuff like this at this point. From what we've seen so far, it's almost inevitable that Verstappen will win the title this year. Leclerc has been a match for him for most of the season. Just a couple of instances where he's made mistakes, Max has capitalized. On the other hand, the Scuderia have failed to help Charles do the same when the Dutchman has had an off day. When they'll end this titleless streak, I don't know. But it will only happen when they stop shooting themselves in the foot and making unforced errors. I don't enjoy making these videos where I'm just constantly criticizing Ferrari, because I genuinely want them to do well. It's just frustrating because they've come so far but are still unable to maximize their potential. Luckily, their car is still very strong, and the twisty nature of the Hungaroring should play to its characteristics, so at least they'll have a good chance of securing a win before the summer break. But unless something catastrophic happens to Red Bull in the remaining races, it will be incredibly difficult for Ferrari and Leclerc to overhaul their lead. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know how you think Leclerc's 2022 campaign compares to Vettel's in 2018. As always, be sure to leave a like, share this video around with your friends, and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to keep up to date with my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.